Friends, we will start shortly, but I'm waiting for Dr. Hans, the representative of the government of Norway and the president of UNIA.
He's here. He's here.
Oh, he is. All right. Dr. Hans, could you please open your cam if you are able to?
If you are not, please raise your hand.
Rabbi David, could you please open your cam so we know that you are here? I saw you are. So could I ask the speakers to please put their cams on? Archbishop Thomas, welcome. Dr. Hosna, welcome.
So to get visible on the screen, if I may, just to support my colleague, it's helpful to be visible. Just open your microphone for 1 second. Those who are speakers, then you will automatically be transferred from the list to the preference of the screen. So camera and screen, please.
Yeah, I hope it works.
It is working beautifully well. Right, so Your Holiness, Eminences, Excellences, distinguished faith leaders, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, greetings of peace, greetings of love and prosperity. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to friends across the globe. I am humbled and honored to welcome you all to this opening session of the Faith for Earth Dialogue, being held as part of the United Nations Environment Assembly 5.2. This is your platform, the platform of wisdom and compassion for engaging in inspirational and spiritual dialogue. I'm delighted to welcome more than 451 participants from 76 countries and 260 cities, representing 55 religions and congregations, with an impressive gender parity of 49.5% female participants. Ladies and gentlemen, the 24 dialogue sessions, which will be held during the period starting today, 21st of February to 4th of March, are being co-convened with 94 partner organizations, with 180 speakers, covering issues related to the theme of UNIA, strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and the midterm strategy of UNEP, but also covering priorities identified by faith actors. These sessions address the triple planetary crisis and the thematic areas of UNEP and its foundational and enabling programs that you, the faith leaders, engaged in identifying in 2020 through our strategic dialogue we had at that time with more than 100 participants from 40 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted that today we are moving away from discussing issues among and between the faith community to discussing them with other stakeholders. While faith-based organizations and NGOs represent 51% of the registered participants, we have with us participants from 28 member states. 10% of the participants are from the UN, and 14% are from the academia, and 6% from the private sector. This is a demonstration that your work and our work together over the past few years has paid dividends in making the point that faith actors are major players in environmental policy and advocacy. This morning, our social media reach got to 11 million people. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored that we have with us today a distinguished group of political and faith leaders in the opening session. I am sure their wisdom and words of inspirations will lead us and engage better and serve the cause that we are all geared towards fulfilling: one earth, many religions, and one goal. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to introduce Ms. Inger Anderson, the UN Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UNEP. Ms. Anderson joined UNEP in 2019 as Executive Director after an impressive career. Previously, between 2015 and 19, Ms. Anderson was the Director General of the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Before that, she served as Vice President of the World Bank. She worked for many years as Senior Advisor in UNDP when I met her first 25 years ago. Ms. Anderson has more than 30 years of experience in international development, economics, environmental sustainability, strategy and operations. She has led work on a range of issues including agriculture, environmental management, biodiversity conservation, climate change, infrastructure, energy, transport, and water resources management, and hydro diplomacy. I am honored to ask Ms. Anderson to take the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Iyad. And this is very embarrassing with all these accolades. I'm still that young woman that you met 30 years ago, at least in my mind, because I remain optimistic all the more so when I sit in a gathering as distinguished as this and I see the commitments around this virtual table. Because friends, what we are seeing is with your true leadership, faith actors are really stepping into the sustainable field, to the environmental field, to the development field. We know that more than 80% of people on Earth have a faith that guides them for how they live on this planet. And we are seeing these faith organizations participating in ever greater numbers in the multilateral environmental agreements, in the COPs, as well as in other significant events such as UNEA. And just this past June, we saw high-level faith leaders such as His Holiness Pope Francis and the Imam of Al-Azhar at the launch of the Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. And that's an important, very significant step. We have been very proud here at the United Nations Environment Program, headquartered in beautiful Nairobi, to have the honor of hosting this Faith for Earth coalition with faith groups from across the world, working together in partnership with intergovernmental organizations, with member states, with multi-stakeholder platforms for global interfaith dialogue and cooperation between faith leaders, organizations, youth, scientists, policymakers, and environmentalists, so that together we can strengthen education and stewardship, so that we can strengthen the linkages between religious values and environmental stewardship, so that together we can enhance behavioral change, so that we can take care of our common earth. And when we mobilize the faith community, we see very clearly that when that community acts on science, the world shifts. And so how can we mobilize that community to adopt green building standards, to switch to renewable energy, to green our cities, to make more sustainable the consumption that we have, and thus the footprint of our individual households? We can do that by the way we engage through our faith in environment, and by the way we engage in our community in our faith. At this point, obviously, the power of reach of the faith community is so enormous, it is worthwhile reckoning with. The power of reach also of the faith community in terms of economic power is not to be underestimated. Faith-based investment are significant, and there are faith-based investment institutions that can align their investments with the Sustainable Development Goal and with long-term security of our planet. In fact, faith-based investment is the fourth largest economic power on the earth. When we add it all together, religion in the US alone contributes $1.2 trillion a year to the socioeconomic value of the US economy. And when we scale that out to the globe, it is so much bigger. So by building back better, we can divest from oil and gas. We can use the 50 faith-based organizations, churches and Islamic organizations, and many, many more that have committed to divestment. We've seen significant contribution from faith-based organization of the Jewish, the Buddhist, the Hindu, the Christian, and the Muslim faith and others, to nature conservation, to renewable energy, to fossil fuel divestment, to sustainable agriculture. And also many of the faith organizations, many religious organizations are actually very important players on nature conservation. Many faith organizations own land, and we salute that. 5% of all commercial forests are in fact owned by faith-based organizations. 8% of habitable land, 36 times the size of the United Kingdom, for example, are owned by faith-based organizations. We at UNEP are incredibly proud of the honor that we have to host the Faith for Earth initiative, and how we have seen in 2017, where we were just 2 faith-based organizations, to today, where we have the honor of having 54 amongst our members. And more than 42 organizations, members of the UN Multi-Faith Advisory Council, working groups handling and working on the triple planetary crisis, the climate crisis, the nature and biodiversity loss crisis, and the pollution and waste crisis, mobilizing action and scientific evidence and raising awareness. We have published a number of state-of-the-art documents to aid religious communities with understanding the ecology dimensions, and that has been very significant for us to support the religious communities on religion and ecology. We've also rolled out 8 courses, a number of courses, and 8 more courses will be rolled out in April. We've published the Faith for Earth Call for Action book and the Faith Strategy for the Decade of the Ecosystem Restoration, and guidelines for how to green your houses of worship. So in closing, let me just say that environmental ethics, which faith-based organizations bring so firmly to the table, we see that as an effective part of environmental governance. Religions have a moral and a spiritual responsibility, and they often exercise this so beautifully towards nature and towards the creation. So in impacting behavioral change for the better, we believe that we can really seek together to prevent pollution, to conserve nature, and to impact consumption choices. Behavioral values, as we know, are scripted into our religions and our beliefs. All religions contain messages of environmental care and stewardship for a planet that can provide for human flourishing. Living in harmony with nature is an ethical behavior recommended by all faith systems and all adherents for every religion. This a specific topic I'd like to bring to your attention is plastic pollution. We have before the member states of the United Nations, 193 member states, a suggested resolution that would start the process for establishing a global agreement to end plastic pollution, to reduce the use of plastic from source to sea. We hope that UNEA 5.2 will be that historical milestone for plastic pollution, as the Paris Agreement was for climate. And we hope and trust and pray that with your strong engagement, you will help us get us there. So to all, my deep thanks, and let me now hand it back to you, Iyad.
Thank you very much, Inger, for your continuous support and specifically for being with us today and for your words. And I am sure that we will work together with member states and with other stakeholders to maximize the power of reach and power of faith organizations to advance the agenda for living in harmony with nature. I very much understand that you are very busy and you have back-to-back meetings after this. So at your convenience, please feel free to leave whenever that suits you. So I'm also honored to welcome and introduce His Excellency Dr. Hans Ratskar, Special Envoy at the Ministry of Climate and Environment of Norway since September 2020. Dr. Hans is deputizing His Excellency, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Norway, the President of INEA 5. Dr. Hans was ambassador, permanent representative to the UN and other international organizations in Geneva, and earlier as an advisor on forests, sustainable development, and indigenous and local communities issues with UNDP. He was state secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs between 2013 and 15, and he has served as ambassador to Kenya and Somalia and permanent representative to the UN organizations based in Nairobi. Dr. Hans also was Director General and Special Envoy for Climate Change and served as the first director of the Government of Norway's Climate and Forest Initiative from 2008 to 11. Dr. Hans has been ambassador and special advisor for conflict prevention and peace building operations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and chief negotiator. He held several ambassadorial positions and governor of several development banks around the world. Dr. Hans, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Iyad, and Executive Director, distinguished guests, dear friends around. It's a great honor for me to be here with you today and to represent the President of UNEA 5 and to meet with a group of people representing several rich and diverse faith and spiritual traditions. Norway is pleased to see that UNEP is continuing to develop the platform for religious leaders to show the way and mobilize action on the environment agenda. There is a profound need for new and strengthened linkages between actors and issues across the traditional boundaries between jurisdictions, institutions, and sectors. We believe that religious actors and indigenous peoples could prove decisive in highlighting the urgency of standing up for nature in order to achieve sustainable development goals, globally and in countries. Above all, religious leaders, indigenous peoples, and people of faith can help formulate and convey a much needed spiritual and ethical dimension to policy making and united efforts to turn the tide and remedy our fractured relationship with nature. Humanity's deep connection to the earth spiritual traditions and practices. Faith leaders from around the world can bring together diverse and complementary perspectives to help identify and nurture narratives and initiatives that place nature at the heart of global recovery, sustainable development, and climate solutions. Norway's experience from the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative shows that religious and spiritual leaders can give voice and moral support to the struggle for the protection of nature and the rights of people whose livelihood depends on it. They can support, complement, and enhance the efforts of governments, civil society, and climate and nature-friendly businesses. This specific initiative is focused at preventing further destruction of the world's remaining rainforests and the protection of indigenous peoples. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative has gained a solid momentum in some of the world's most important rainforest countries. In our experience, the initiative's success is embedded in focusing on a limited field within the climate and environment agenda. The initiative's strong engagement at the country level is another important factor that ensures relevance to the people and politics where it matters in rainforest countries and communities. Faith is fundamental to the majority of people of the world. The world's remaining rainforest, with its unique and overwhelming biodiversity, human and non-human inhabitants, are critical for life on Earth. Let us be clear. We will not reach global climate and development goals if we do not succeed in protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing the world's tropical rainforest. At this point in time, we are all forest dependent. UNEP's support to the collaboration of faith leaders could be an important contribution towards recreating a healthy planet with prosperity for all. A partnership owned by religious communities, globally and in countries. To succeed in such a collaboration, it is crucial that religious leaders and people of faith themselves are at the forefront, with strong support from UNEP, serving as World Environment Community Partner. With this, I wish you the best of luck for a successful Faith for Earth dialogue, with a sincere belief that the coming days will be accompanied by meaningful and diverse sharing of thoughts, contributing to the creation of a new and much needed momentum to stand up for nature. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We're very happy to have you with us, and we very much appreciate the support of Norway, not only on the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, but in general with UNEP and specifically with the Faith for Earth program. So thank you very much for being with us today. I'm now honored to introduce Rabbi David Rosen, American Jewish Committee International Director of Interreligious Affairs. Rabbi Rosen is based in Jerusalem and directs Hillbron Institute for International Interreligious Understanding. He is a member of the Chief Rabbinate of Israel's Delegation for Relations with World Religions and is International President of Religions for Peace, Honorary President of the International Council of Christians and Jews, and the Jewish representative on the Board of Directors of the King Abdullah International Center for Interreligious Dialogue. In 2005, the Pope made Rabbi Rosen a Knight Commander of the Order of St. Gregory the Great, and in 2010, he was named a Commander of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. For his interreligious work, Rabbi Rosen, we are honored to have you. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iyad, and all who are organizing this very important event. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you. One of the questions we were asked in preparation for this event was, can religions come together unified in their call for a better world and on our spiritual moral responsibilities towards our planet? I think the very event in itself is a demonstration of how much we can. But religions, of course, must. This is our responsibility to our own respective faiths and traditions to care for God's creation. Not only is Genesis explicit about the need to work and protect, which is in effect sustainable development, if we declare that the cosmos is a manifestation of the divine, then the very diminution of any aspect of the divine is, as it were, a diminution of the divine presence. Therefore, there is a critical, fundamental obligation for religions not only to work together, but to lead the struggle to ensure that we have a healthy, flourishing ecosystem and to guarantee posterity for future generations. The book of Deuteronomy in the Hebrew Bible tells us to choose life. Life, to choose life, to nurture life is a religious imperative. We're also told in Deuteronomy that we have to protect our health and prevent dangers and threats to our health. And of course, there is the social obligation towards our neighbor, towards society at large. And therefore, we have an obligation to ensure that the world at large is a healthy place and that there are healthy contexts for all communities. It's not coincidental that within many religions, such as Judaism, there is a focus on diet as being something that is inextricably bound up with religious consciousness, with mindfulness, with the way we live our lifestyle. And that is not irrelevant by any stretch of the imagination to the crises we find today. Lifestyle, not only as Pope Francis calls it, a culture of waste, but the priorities that we choose, not least of all, the kind of consumption that we have, particularly in the West, and the degree to which we are involved in the production with enormous cruelty and waste of the livestock industry means that we have to be conscious much more of the relationship between religion and ethics and diet and the kind of lifestyle that we practice. Deuteronomy also tells us that we are obliged to prevent destruction. It uses the context of a war of self-defense, but rabbinic tradition understands that to apply to all waste. And therefore, getting back again to the lifestyle we pursue very much within the West, the amount of water and arable land that we could provide for all those who are dying of hunger could ensure that there would be enough for all. As has been said by so many before, there is enough for human need, but not enough for human greed. In the book of Leviticus, in 26, there is a chapter that chapter tells us, first and foremost, warns against the practice of idolatry, especially of we making idols ourselves. And then it goes on to talk about how if you follow God's injunctions, then you will have wonderful seasons, great fecundity, you will have wonderful rains and great harvests. But if you do not follow God's injunctions, then you will not have your rains and you will not have good harvests, and therefore the whole of society and humanity suffers. In the Middle Ages, rational Jewish philosophers like Maimonides would understand the text as having a metaphoric meaning, and they would interpret it to say that these ideas, which are essentially one of the consequences of our actions, had to be phrased in manners that even the simple farmer could understand, and therefore uses these kind of metaphors. But today we can understand it literally as never before, because it's precisely been our neglect of our responsibility to God's creation and of our failure to care for our fellow human being, and the pursuit of avarice, greed, and exploitation of the vulnerable that has contributed to the terrible crisis that we face today. It therefore is critically important for religions to lead the way, to give guidance in terms of diet, guidance in terms of living responsibility and of avoiding wastage, and of ensuring that we are therefore conscious of the gifts of which we have been blessed and to sustain and guarantee them for future generations. I think the COVID-19 crisis has demonstrated how critical it is for science, religion, and civil society to come together. I don't think there's any question of the desire of religion to do that. I think there has been a question, and maybe still is, of the degree to which civic leadership and the political leadership is interested in engaging religious leadership. But I think that this event and the UNEP leadership has demonstrated an example for all, and I hope and I pray that we will all work together to ensure the posterity of the only home we all have. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Rabbi Rosen, for your wonderful words. And I hope that we will live the way God asked us to live. And this is the least our spiritual morality requires us to do. Now, I'm honored to introduce Mr. Don De Silva, Buddhist leader and director at UNEP. Don De Silva was a former senior official of the United Nations Environment Program. He reported on the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment 50 years ago. After the creation of UNEP, he worked in the communications team and initiated effective global media strategies to create awareness about issues such as sustainability and climate change. He also took part in establishing intergovernmental initiatives, including the South Asia Cooperative Environment Program. Presently, he works as a university Buddhist chaplain and mentor in the UK. He conducts regular workshops on the critical links between Buddhism, interfaith, environment, and justice. Mr. De Silva, the mic is yours.
Thank you. I will now share the screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. This presentation, which is short, is about faith, sustainability, and leadership. Faith and ecology is nothing new. People of faith and women leaders have played a decisive role in initiating and shaping the modern environment movement. Inga Anderson, UNEP's first woman executive director, has a rich heritage, and I will demonstrate this. We start with Rachel Louise Carson, an American marine biologist whose book Silent Spring, which was published in 1962, on the impact of chemicals and the environment, stirred the conscience of the world. In an interesting speech that she gave, which was unearthed and published in a later book, The Discovered Writings of Rachel Carson, she says to a sorority of women journalists, "I believe natural beauty has a necessary place in the development of any individual or any society." Rachel Carson's concerns were widely echoed right throughout the world. And these world concerns spurred the United Nations to act. And these concerns were picked up by the Burmese UN Secretary General U Thant, who was in office from 1961 to 1971. A devout Buddhist, he was appointed as Secretary General in 1966 by a unanimous vote, but he refused to serve a third term. And then he was tasked by the UN to deliver a report, which he did, on the activities of the UN organizations and programs relevant to the human environment. And this report then warned, if current trends continue, life on Earth could be endangered. The report called for the convening of a UN conference on the human environment. And that task fell to Maurice Strong. After several bad starts within the UN, the task of organizing the Earth Summit was given to Maurice Strong, a Canadian entrepreneur, and then who became the Secretary General of the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment, which was held in Stockholm. He became the first Executive Director of UNEP and an Undersecretary General for the UN under Kofi Annan. This is myself with Maurice Strong at the Rio +20 conference. I worked with him for some 30 odd years. Just to let you know that Strong was a volunteer with the YMCA and its World Service Program, became a national president in Canada, and then chaired the Interfaith Aid Movement of the World Alliance of YMCAs. That is his faith background. Then, as a backdrop to the historic Stockholm Conference, an official report was commissioned by Strong. This was prepared with the assistance of some 152 specialists in 52 countries. The task of putting this report together fell on Barbara Ward, a pioneering economist, and René Dubos, a microbiologist and pathologist. This book articulated the concept of sustainable development. Barbara Ward was a person of deep faith, the author of Faith and Freedom, where she articulated the relevance of faith to democracy. She was the founder of the International Institute of Environment and Development, which I had the privilege to work with after my work with UNEP when I moved to London. In this book, on page 297, Ward and Dubos writes, "We have lacked a wider rationale of unity. Our prophets have sought it. If this vision of unity, which is not a vision only, but a hard and inescapable scientific fact, can become part of the common insight of all inhabitants of planet Earth, then we may find, excuse me, beyond all other inevitable pluralisms, we can achieve just enough unity of purpose to build a human world." Then we move and turn to the role played by India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at the UN Conference on the Human Environment. She was reluctant, as with other leaders of developing countries, to attend because they thought at that time that environmental issues were the rich world's disease. But she changed her mind, and her presence encouraged leaders from other developing countries to attend as well. But I would like to just quote the closing of her historic statement. And it goes like this. In their hymn to earth, the sages of the Atharva Veda chanted, I quote, "What of thee I dig out, let that quickly grow over. Let me not hit thy vitals or their heart, so that man himself be vital and of good heart and conscious of his responsibility." In the West, the word ecology was coined in 1866 by Ernst Haeckel to mean the study of the relationship between living organisms, including humans, and their physical environment. But some 2,500 years ago, the Buddha highlighted sustainability. In many of his discourses, he is reported to have highlighted this as follows: Digaratang hitaya sukhaya, lasting welfare and happiness. And also in his seminal discourse on Pratitya Samuppada, which is commonly translated as dependent origination, which includes the interdependence of people and nature. So faith brings added value to the environment movement. How? We deal with the environment in the environment. And in the main faiths, each person is a multinational. Faith and sustainability are two sides of the same coin. Sustainable development demands faith involvement, and we will not solve climate change or environmental issues without the tacit participation of the 80% of people of faith communities throughout the world. I would like to end by pointing out, of course, to your attention the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. UNEP needs to be commended for organizing this initiative on Faith for Earth. It is also heartening to see that the UNEP Faith for Earth initiative is within the office of the executive director, so it demands high attention. But I am proposing that faith and values be the 18th goal, given the critical role that faith plays in the world today, as it has done in shaping the global world environment movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Silva, and thank you for your wise words. Indeed, we are very proud of you having been a director at UNEP, but also what you're doing right now with the Buddhist organizations and engaging on sustainable development. So thank you very much. I am honored to introduce His Excellency Judge Muhammad Abdussalam, Secretary General of the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity. His Excellency Judge Abdussalam is a member of Al-Azhar Center for Interreligious Dialogue, member of the Executive Office of the Muslim Council of Elders, and the former legislative and legal advisor to the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. He is the first Arab Muslim to receive the Medal of Commander with a star from the Pope. This medal is among the highest honors awarded by the Vatican and came in recognition of his efforts to promote interreligious dialogue and tolerance. Judge Abdussalam represents the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar on Religions for Peace, highest leadership body, the World Council. Judge Muhammad Abdussalam address will be in Arabic with interpretation by Dr. Ibrahim Gadallah. قاضي محمد عبد السلام الميكروفون مع حضرتك.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور إياد.
أعتقد ميوت الدكتور. أنا ما عم بسمع القاضي محمد عبد السلام.
دي not mute. No mute.
هلا ممتاز.
كويس. أوكي، شكرا جزيلا دكتور إياد الصديق الكريم، وشكرا على هذه المبادرة المهمة التي يحمل عنوانها إشارة قوية، وهي الإيمان من أجل الأرض. أعتقد أن هذا العنوان يذكرنا جميعا بأهمية الحفاظ على كوكبنا المشترك. كلنا يعلم أن كوكبنا اليوم يمر بتحدي كبير جدا نتيجة التغيرات المناخية التي أصبحت تهدد مستقبل البشرية بتأثيراتها السلبية واسعة النطاق، ولدينا تهديد حقيقي لكثير من مناحي الحياة، ومنها الإنتاج الغذائي والحيواني وارتفاع منسوب المياه البحار وخطورة الفيضانات التي تودي بحياة الشعوب وباستقرارها، فضلا عن أن هذا ينعكس بالتأكيد على تنمية الصراعات في كثير من المناطق والبلدان. أيضا كلنا يعلم أن الدول الصناعية الكبرى هي لها دور أبرز في حدوث هذه التغيرات المناخية التي يشهدها العالم، والدول الفقيرة في ذات الوقت هي التي تتحمل الآثار والتبعات والنتائج. هل تسمعوني جيدا؟ أنا
نعم أسمع. هل تفضل أن يكون الترجمة مباشرة بعد كل جملة أم إلى النهاية؟
لا، بعد في النهاية أعتقد.
تفضل. Go ahead.
طبعا كلنا يعلم أن الأديان أيضا جاءت تحمل الخير والسلام والتعايش لكل الناس، وتحافظ على الحيوان والنبات والجماد وعلى البيئة، وفي سبيل ذلك خرجت على مدار السنوات الماضية عدة مبادرات مهمة من قبل القادة والمؤثرين والرموز في المؤسسات الدينية في العالم لتؤكد على خطورة هذه الظاهرة الكارثية، وهي ظاهرة التغير المناخي على كوكب الأرض. الدعوة التي أطلقها الإمام الأكبر شيخ الأزهر الشريف وقداسة البابا فرانسيس تحت عنوان وثيقة الأخوة الإنسانية من أبو ظبي في 4 فبراير 2019 والتي تحولت إلى يوم دولي للأخوة الإنسانية تحدثت بشكل مباشر عن العديد من مشكلات العالم وخاصة قضية التغير المناخي وخطورتها، فدعت المؤمنين بالأديان بل وغير المؤمنين بالأديان إلى التوقف أمام هذه القضية الخطيرة ووضع السبل اللازمة لمعالجتها. وعلى أرض الواقع رأينا، وكانت هذه الفرصة التي التقيت فيها بالصديق دكتور إياد في القمة التي نظمها الفاتيكان بحضور الإمام الأكبر شيخ الأزهر وقداسة البابا فرانسيس من أجل التغير المناخي، وأرسلوا نداء الأديان إلى كوب 26 حيث يجتمع قادة العالم مؤكدين ضرورة تقديم حلول ملموسة لإنقاذ كوكب الأرض من هذه الأزمة غير المسبوقة. بعد ذلك جاء المؤتمر المهم الذي عقدته جامعة الأزهر الشريف في القاهرة في ديسمبر 2021 والتي أكدت فيه على أهمية دور القيادات الدينية في مواجهة قضايا التغيرات المناخية، بالإضافة إلى أنها أعلنت هذا العام عاما للبيئة ولوضع أجندة متكاملة لرفع الوعي بضرورة الحفاظ على المحيط البيئي للإنسان، بل قامت بإدراج قضية التغير المناخي في مناهج التعليم بالجامعة، وهذه خطوة تاريخية مهمة. والسؤال الصعب دائما هو ما هي الخطوات العملية بعد هذه الجهود؟ ما هي الخطوات التي اتخذتها المؤسسات التعليمية والمؤسسات الدينية تجاه تفعيل وترسيخ هذه الثقافة لدى الأجيال؟ هذا سؤال مهم أعتقد أننا ينبغي أن نطرحه دائما، لأن يعني الشعور بالمسؤولية أولا هو أهم خطوة في إنقاذ هذه البيئة. نحن أمام تحدي أخلاقي كبير مطالبين فيه بالعمل المشترك من أجل حماية هذه الأرض، وأعتقد أن حضراتكم من سبقوني تحدثوا عن معلومات قيمة وتناول فلسفي لرؤية التعاون من أجل إنقاذ الأرض، وخاصة التعاون بين قادة ورموز الأديان كما ذكر أخي الحاخام ديفيد روزن. أعتقد أنه نحن بحاجة إلى إجراءات شجاعة، نحن بحاجة إلى أن يصدر عن القمم العالمية للتغير المناخي إجراءات محددة يتم تنفيذها على الأرض لإنقاذ الكوكب من هذه المشكلة. نأمل أن يتمخض عن القمتين المقبلتين في جمهورية مصر العربية ودولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة حلول جذرية لهذه الأزمة العالمية، وأن يكون حوار الأديان من أجل الأرض حاضرا فيها بقوة من خلال إسهامات القيادات الدينية في التوعية بمخاطر الممارسات التي من شأنها مفاقمة التغير المناخي والتلوث البيئي، بما تملكه هذه القيادات والرموز الدينية من تأثير روحي على الملايين من البشر حول العالم. الأخوة الأعزاء، شكرا جزيلا لكم، وأنا سعيد بالمشاركة والاستفادة من هذا اللقاء المهم والمؤثر والذي يضم نخبة من المثقفين والمطلعين بهذه القضية الخطيرة، ونأمل أن تؤتي هذه الجهود ثمارها في التوعية بهذه الأحداث والمخاطر المحدقة بالبيئة وباستقرار الشعوب والأوطان. وشكرا جزيلا لكم دكتور إياد ولهذه المبادرة الطيبة. شكرا.
شكرا جزيلا قاضي عبد السلام. Dr. Ibrahim, would you please translate? Is Dr. Ibrahim with us?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yeah, at the outset, I would like to thank you, my dear friend, Dr. Iyad, and all the organizers for this very important initiative, which from its title, Faith for Earth Dialogue, means that we can join forces together and we can deliver outstanding contributions to solving these global issues. Today, our planet is facing a great challenge as a result of the climate changes that threaten the future of humanity with their wide-ranging negative effects, from severe changes in global temperature that threaten food and animal production and rising sea levels, which increase the risk of catastrophic floods. In addition, these climate changes lead to growing conflicts and instability and threaten the world economy. This is the case while the world is still suffering from a persistent health crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Although the major industrial countries assume the larger responsibility for the climate change, it is the poor countries that pay the price and face the repercussions, especially since the economy of these countries largely depends on climate-affected sectors. This makes it imperative for us to urgently save humanity from the dangerous repercussions of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, all religions' core message is to ensure goodness, peace, and coexistence for all human beings, and to preserve animals and plants. To this end, over the past years, calls have been issued by religious leaders, institutions, and entities across the world to warn against the threat climate change poses to the entire life on Earth. In this context, the two greatest religious symbols in our world, His Eminence, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Professor Ahmed Al-Tayyib, and His Holiness Pope Francis, head of the Catholic Church, have made their lofty humanitarian call from the United Arab Emirates capital, Abu Dhabi, on the 4th of February 2019. They presented to the world the document on human fraternity, the most important declaration in human history, which sheds light on many problems facing humanity, including climate change. The document calls on believers and non-believers alike, and all religious leaders, international policymakers, and the global economies to work seriously to stop the global warming. Practically speaking, a joint appeal was signed by religious leaders and a number of specialized scientists from around the world during the meeting hosted by the Vatican City last October. This was the occasion in which I was acquainted with my dearest brother, Dr. Iyad. This international meeting featured the participation of Pope Francis and the Grand Imam Al-Tayyib and many religious leaders from around the world. They all sent a message to the world leaders gathered at the COP26 with the need to provide concrete solutions to save the planet from the unprecedented environmental crisis. They urged the world leaders to work hard to achieve solidarity between developing countries and the advanced nations, to promote common moral values across all religions to address this urgent crisis. There was also another important conference held by the prestigious Al-Azhar University in December 2021. It emphasized the role of religious leaders in confronting climate change-related issues. The conference also declared 2022 the year of the environment and set an integrated agenda to raise awareness of the need to protect the environment. It also called for incorporating the climate change issue and the role of the society to address it into the educational curricula taught at Al-Azhar, which in my view constitutes as a significant step on the ground. It is the feeling of shared responsibility and joining forces that will guide our steps to providing tangible solutions to these problems. Distinguished attendees, we find ourselves facing a great moral challenge. It's time to work together to protect biodiversity on this planet and take bold measures for the benefit of all humanity. I'd like to commend the insightful words presented and shared with us with my brother, Rabbi David Rosen, and the elite group of speakers who preceded me, because they have summed up a set of procedures that will help us move forward in solving this problem. And I would recommend very much that out of these conferences, we have a practical roadmaps that would help us provide solutions to these problems, especially climate change. In this context, we look forward to the upcoming 2 rounds of the United Nations Climate Change Conference of Parties, COP27 and COP28, which are scheduled to be held in Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, respectively. We hope they will contribute to finding radical solutions to this global crisis, and that dialogue about faith for Earth will be strongly present in these summits. For indeed, religious leaders can through their spiritual influence on millions of people around the world, they can make tangible contributions into raising awareness of the practices that exacerbate climate change and environmental pollution. We hope that these efforts will yield positive results and contribute to curbing the phenomenon of climate change and its serious impacts on humanity. I hope very much that these efforts out of this event and other similar events that aim to raise awareness of these radical issues will come to fruition by contributing to finding efficient solutions to promoting a prosperous future for all humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim, and my sincere appreciation to Judge Mohammed Abdeslam. And you have my assurances that we will put our hands together for a better contribution towards the important meetings that will take place, COP26 and COP27, but also other initiatives that we will work together on. So thank you very much for all your support. Now I am honored to introduce Cardinal Peter Turkson, Prefect Emeritus of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, Archbishop Emeritus of Cape Coast. Cardinal Turkson was ordinated for Archdiocese of Cape Coast in 1992 and was created and proclaimed Cardinal by St. John Paul II in the Consistory of 2000, the title of St. Liborio. Among his many honorable positions, Cardinal Turkson has served as the President of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. Throughout his years as an Archbishop and a Cardinal, Cardinal Turkson has received numerous honors and awards. In 2016, Cardinal Turkson was appointed the first prefect of the Department of the Services of Integral Human Development and became Prefect Emeritus of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Cardinal Turkson was the pivot behind holding the International Conference on Laudato Si in UNEP in Nairobi in 2019 with the participation of more than 360 participants from around the world. Cardinal Turkson, the honor is ours and the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Iyad. Thank you, all of you distinguished panelists and all of you dear speakers. I ask for the collaboration of Amir in showing the slides now. Okay, so all the speakers before me have laid a lot of emphasis on the need for a roadmap, on the need for religions to show the way, to mobilize action, to lead a struggle, and to provide guidance. I'm hoping that with this small input of ours from our dicastery, we'll be able to just respond to that, move a little bit from motivation and encouragement to showing the roadmap, a way or concrete way of doing certain things. So, as you all know, in 2015, Pope Francis came out with this great encyclical on ecology, Integral Ecology, Laudato Si. And with this encyclical, express this concern for the environment. What I like to do now is to show how we've concretely formulated a set of principles to enable us to put this into practice. So could you go next slide? So the encyclical then significant carries the subtitle, Care for Our Common Home. This is what our conversation is about. And in talking about the earth as our common home, Pope Francis says in a great crucial paradigm, which is integral human development. Next slide. So what does that mean? This is an attempt to present how fragile our planet is. Look from outside the earth, it's a very tiny, small thing out there. And this simply underlines and emphasizes the great need to do all to pay attention to the earth, our common home. Next slide, please. So in Laudato Si, Pope Francis invites the churches, religions, and all people of goodwill to care for our fragile planetary home before it is too late. And all the conversation and the input we've had so far is going to underline this urgency. And he said, I urgently appeal them for a new dialogue about how we're shaping our planet. That's what we're doing now. This is part of this dialogue to see how we're shaping our planet. And so we move on then to our dicastery then decided to move on from Laudato Si to a concrete application. And we formulated what I am about to share with you now, called the Laudato Si Action Platform, as a way of encouraging, through the church's connectivity, the different people around the world, and if not only even limited to the Catholic Church, but all faiths, to be able to come together to do this. So what is the method? The method is to identify 7 actors in society, civil actors, and then formulate 7 goals and establish for ourselves 7 years. So 7 actors, 7 goals, 7 years to implement the demands of Laudato Si. And who are these actors? Families. There's a role every family can play. Parishes, dioceses, mosques, synagogues, religious places of worship, educational institutions, schools, universities, polytechnic, primary schools, and all can be actors. Hospitals and healthcare centers and institutions can be actors. And then the economy itself and its principal actors, the workers, business, cooperatives, and all, and then organizations, and finally, partnership roles. So next slide will show us these actors in detail. So here they are: families, educational institutions, the economy, religious orders, parishes, churches, mosques, synagogues, and all, hospitals, healthcare centers, and organizations and different groups acting in partnership. So these are the 7 actors. And as you see, no aspect of civil society falls outside this. And if we responding to this, according to these 7 actors, every sector of society is involved. And what are we supposed to do? Take the Laudato Si goals. We formulated 7 Laudato Si goals in the spirit of the Ecology of Pope Francis. Go ahead, next slide. And these goals are to respond to the cry of the earth, to respond to the cry of the poor, ecological economics, simple lifestyle, ecological education, ecological spirituality, etc. So what we're saying is that a group can decide to spend this year trying to have action and activities which show their response to the cry of the earth. So maybe restoring forests, restoring environment, renewing waterways, whatever. But for a year, a group can dedicate itself to projects that reflect its response to the cry of the earth. Following year, it can decide to undertake action that reflects the response to the cry of the poor. The third year, it can look at ecological economics. How can the different economic systems help promote ecology? Then the 4th year, it can take up the application of simple lifestyles, no wasteful matter, anything that be stringent lifestyles to promote this. Then ecological education. Pope Francis invites us all to become ecological citizens. And for that to happen, we need to ecological education. This can start in the basic school, primary school, universities, all different levels, but make us all ecologically sensitive to the needs of the environment. Then there is therefore ecological spirituality, developing a heart for nature and for the ecology. In fact, in Laudato Si, Pope Francis invites us to be able to suffer the suffering of the earth, suffer with the earth, be compassionate, as it were, with the earth. And then the last thing is acting in partnership, acting together. Community engagement, partnership, and action, not only Catholics, not only Jews, not only Muslims, the possibility of coming together to act together in unison is a thing. So these are the goals, and there are 7 of them, and we're encouraging the different actors, 7 actors, 7 goals. Take each goal a year, work through it. The following year, you take another goal. What are we supposed to do? Our office creates a platform that follows all of these actors around the world, and every year, every now and then, as it were, organize a small event to identify the best Laudato to see parish, the best Laudato to see mosque, the best Laudato to see school, the best Laudato to see university, all by way of stimulating action to happen. And so these are details of what we can do when we're responding to the cry of the earth. Use clean renewable energy, reduce fossil fuels, act to achieve carbon neutrality, efforts to promote biodiversity, guaranteeing access to all. These are some sample actions that can be undertaken by way of responding to the cry of the poor. Then, next one also has, next slide, please. So ecological economics, for example. Okay. So ecological economics, for example, fair trade, ethical consumption, ethical investment, divestment from fossil fuels, and the lack of, I think there was a talk earlier on about, the lady, the guest of honor who introduced the whole thing called us to plastics. And they need to look at plastic consent and all of that. So this have to do with all of ecological economics, everything to ensure the balance. Then adoption of simple lifestyles. This is something that is within the reach of everybody. Each one of us can adopt a simple lifestyle. Avoid using single-use plastics. Adopt a more plant-based diet. Reduce meat consumption, greater use of public transport, avoid pollution, and all of that. Simple adaptation. When you, even in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, don't have the water tap turned on and still running. The moment you need a little bit of, turn off the tap. You brush your teeth before you turn it off again. There are simple lifestyles all of us can adopt to protect the resources at our disposal. Next slide, please. So ecological education, rethink and redesign educational curricula to highlight our dependence and our relationship with the earth. Ecological institution reforms in the spirit of integral ecology, how interrelated we are with the natural systems that surround us and within which we live. And to create ecological awareness and education, promote ecological vocation of young people, teachers, and leaders, get everybody excited and involved. And this is a part of the program. And the next one will be the 6th, ecological spirituality. This has been mentioned this morning as the one endowment of all religious groups, spirituality. Disposing the spirit to motivate us in every action. So recover religious values. David Rosen introduced us to how a lot of these are based in Hebrew scriptures, the Tanakh. I suppose if we had a Muslim speaker, he would give us the same thing from the Quran, and so on and on and on. So it is to be motivated by all of it to divorce is an attitude of the spirit, of the heart towards everything that is around us, so that we can awaken within us a certain amount of compassion for the pain and the suffering of creation in the earth. 7th, and this is emphasis on community involvement and participatory action. Since most of our communities and societies are all multi-religious and all, it is necessary we recognize participatory action by way of responding to the needs of the earth. And this is what we underline. So these are the 7 goals. You've seen the 7 actors, you've now seen the 7 goals. And what we're talking about now is that these goals be carried on year after year. Our office monitors them, and it creates a database of all of this. As we speak now at this panel, there are 500 universities which have registered in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, all over the world. Local churches, religious orders are registering or coming on board. We have, as it were, to date, about 2 million different individual actors sign on to implement this. And talk about concreteness, this is what we want to do. We know that our scriptures encourage us to be ecologically sensitive, but it's about time we move from all the motivatory talks to concrete, measurable programs and action. And that's what the Laudato to See Action platform intends to do. Create measurable, concrete action that we can measure from year to year and see what impact we're concretely making on everything that is there. So this is an initiative that we're glad to share. We're glad to share with with all the religious bodies. It's something that is open-ended, not simply Catholic. It's something that involves all actors in society, all different actors. It's for 7 years, and the goals are 7. We do not want to say that this replaces the SDGs. No, we're not saying that. But we say, when one realizes the 7 goals, one would have to a large extent also come close to realizing the SDG goals. But we chose 7 for a consistency. 7 groups, 7 years, and 7, as to objectives and all. And so that's a plan that we have now. And the Dicastery for Integral Human Development continues to be where the platform is managed and where the platform data is disseminated. One can visit the website of the Dicastery and can be on this. And anybody wanting to be part of this program or platform can simply just send a mail or whatever, and everybody is welcome and everybody is motivated to embrace this systematic attempt to respond work on solutions. Listen to the cry of the earth 1 year. Listen to the cry of the poor 1 year. Do a simple lifestyle 1 year. Do ecological economics. So the consistency and the discipline that is required is what we wanted to promote. And in this, we're using the great connectivity or the connection power of the church to kind of get all its members on board, so that at the end of the year, come 7 years, we'll be able to celebrate again with the people from the tradition of David Rabbi, as it were, a jubilee year for the earth being given a chance to experience a respite from everything that it suffered from. So thank you, and I just wanted to share this initiative of concrete action with all the panelists. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cardinal Turkson, and thank you for your inspiring work. And certainly Laudato Si is inspiring not only to Christians and Catholic, but the international community. It has certainly inspired us with other Islamic institutions to start working on Al-Mizan, a covenant for the earth, to represent 1.8 billion Muslims in a movement similar and in support to Laudato Si, to bring religions together in service of humanity and the earth we live on.
Thanks.
I'm honored to introduce His Holiness Sadhguru, a yogi, mystic, and visionary, founder of Isha Foundation. His Highness Sadhguru is a visionary, humanitarian, and a prominent spiritual leader, a contemporary guru. Sadhguru works tirelessly towards the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being of all. He speaks at some of the world's most prominent international leadership forums. In January 2007, he participated in 4 panels at the World Economic Forum and spoke on issues ranging from diplomacy and economic development to education and the environment. In 2006, he addressed the World Economic Forum, the Tallberg Forum in Sweden, and the Australian Leadership Retreat. Sadhguru has also served as a delegate to the United Nations Millennium Peace Summit and the World Peace Congress. I invite you to tune in to a video message from His Holiness Sadhguru, who is at the moment on a humanitarian mission. Could you please play the video? There's no sound from my end.
There's no sound?
No sound.
Okay. Apologies.
Namaskaram and greetings to all of you who are at the UNEP Faith for Earth dialogue. A time has come when everyone has to be a part of ecological regeneration on the planet. And those of us who happen to be faith leaders or spiritual leaders have a special responsibility, because people have invested their trust in us. This trust has to transform into well-being means. It just cannot happen without addressing sustainable ways of doing things on the planet. Enhancing the quality of human life will not just happen because of the homes that we build, of the economic conditions. Yes, they are important, but the most important thing is that we have clean water to drink, pure air to breathe, and a rich soil to grow our food upon. These are very important things, as important as how we are within ourselves. Right now we are addressing environment like it's an academic subject. Environment is not an academic subject, and we are not somebody who has to look at it from outside. We are part of the ecology. As a worm is, as a microbe is, we are part of the ecology. Unfortunately, we have become a virulent part of the ecology. This is simply because for the capacity, for the competence and intelligence that is invested in us, unfortunately, we are still functioning compulsively and unconsciously. So to fulfill sustainable development goals, one of the most important thing is we have to strive to bring a certain level of consciousness in every human being, because today as human beings, we are empowered like never before. If we do not conduct ourselves consciously, if we do not think, feel and experience and also function and express ourselves consciously in this world, we will become a serious damage, which we already have become. UNEP stats say that 75% of the land surface has been affected because of human activity, largely agriculture. And the same statistics say that 85% of the wetlands have been seriously affected by human activity, and 65% of the ocean and its life is affected by human activity. Is it not time that we become conscious human beings? Is it not time to create a conscious planet? Is it not time to at least save the fundamentals which are the basis of our existence, like soil, water, air? Above all, right now the deepest concern is soil, because every responsible scientist in the world is pointing out by 2045 we will be producing 40% less food and our populations will be 9.2 billion people. That's not a world in which you want to live. That is not a world where we want to leave our children. That is going to be a desperate world. But we have the opportunity right now to turn it around. Faith leaders particularly have a major role in this, because people are looking up to you as inspiration. Right now the concern is ecology, and we must put the energies of people, resources of people in this direction. Above all, we must strive to move the people in democratic nations so that the governments or the administrations will invest in necessary policy alterations which will bring about ecological well-being. This is not something that will cost us enormous amount of money. This is not something that has to be against somebody. This is not against a particular industry or a particular activity. This is about all of us have been a part of the problem. Let all of us become a part of the solution. If we act now, bring about the necessary policy changes in the world and act upon it, in next 15 to 20 years, we can turn the quality of the soil significantly around, and in turn water and air. This can be done. But if we allow this to go for another 30 to 40 years without any change in direction, then the scale of biodiversity loss that is happening right now is such that in about 35 to 40 years' time, we would have reached a point that if we try to regenerate the soil at that time, it may take 150 to 200 years. This is what people are predicting. So let us not get there, let us act as one humanity. Beyond nationalities, beyond race, beyond religion, beyond caste, creed, gender, whatever identities people have, let's look beyond that. The soil, water and air are the fundamentals of our life. Let us ensure it is available to us in good quality, and above all, we have a responsibility for the unborn child. It is our responsibility to see the future generations have this too. As my part of the commitment, to bring about policy change in the world, we have unfolded a movement called Conscious Planet or Save Soil Movement. As a part of this, from 21st of March, which is the equinox day, I'm starting off from London and riding through 27 nations and arriving in southern India in the Kaveri Basin in 100 days. Well, I'm 65, 30,000 kilometers is not a joyride. So these 100 days, we are seeing how various influencers, celebrities, everybody who has some kind of following or who don't have a following can gather one somehow. Let us make the whole world talk about soil and bring about the policy changes. We're already working with various government. We seek the UNEP support to make this happen to whatever extent. We are already in collaboration with various UN agencies. We want UNEP to be part of it. Above all, I beseech every one of you, the faith leaders, to ensure that everybody talks about soil for 100 days and the necessary steps to bring about policy change. We will set it in motion. I want all of you to be part of it. This is not my moment. This is our planet. Let's make it happen.
Thanks to His Holiness Sadhguru for this inspiring speech and for all the work that you are doing on the ground. And of course, we will be happy to collaborate. Now, I am honored to introduce Archbishop Professor Dr. Thomas Schermacher, the Secretary General of the World Evangelical Alliance, which represents Protestant churches belonging to 143 national evangelical alliances with altogether 600 million members. He is also co-president of the Religions for Peace. He served World Evangelical Alliance in different leadership roles in the last 2 decades, the latest being the Associate Secretary General for theological concerns and interfaith relations before residing at the helm of WEA in 2021. He earned 4 doctorates in economical theology, in cultural anthropology, in ethics, and in the sociology of religions, and he is an extraordinary professor of sociology of religions at the State University of the West Timisoara, Romania, and at the University of Oxford. Archbishop Schermacher is one of the dedicated supporters of Faith for Earth, and I'm honored to have always been in touch with him, and we rely on you, sir, for further support. Professor Schermacher, the mic is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for this nice and polite introduction. I'm happy to see many friends, which I have seen already this year, at least on Zoom, very few of you in real. And I'm happy that we do not only meet with Faith for Earth, but there have been many platforms meanwhile where we dialogue and work together on preserving our planet. Let me start at a negative side. It is not a given that religions help to preserve the planet. In history, we have not been the only ones that were able to go to war against each other. There have been political reasons around borders. There have been a lot of financial, economic reasons, but we all know they also have intermingled with this, or even solely religious reasons to go to war. And what is even stranger is some of the biggest war we ever had were wars within religions. So different wings of religion. Just to take the 2 largest world religions, you know that that Christians, Catholics and Protestants did not have one war against each other, but kept at least one continent under war for quite some time. And let me also remind the second largest world religion about a lot of Sunni versus Shia wars in history until recently. Yeah? And this always includes a mass destruction of the environment. Think a moment that wars have destroyed forests of whole countries. And we are still in a situation where we have to plant trees in places where those trees had been 200 years ago and were taken down to build warships, etc. Yeah. So if we talk about dialogue, it is not only a dialogue between us and the United Nations, not only a dialogue between us and UNEP. Yeah, and I really like the name of Religions for Peace. I see our Secretary General smiling. Yeah, it's Religions for Peace, because this is part of the dialogue we are talking about. As long as we do not talk to each other, but we think it's more important that we fight for our place in this world. This is my territory, these are my people, yeah. We have no time to fight for the future of our planet. It's integral, and the dialogue means number one, religious freedom, or freedom of religion and belief, or belief, I always have to remind, it's our belief in UN language, that is that we are willing to allow other faiths and other religions peacefully to live in this world, accept their place in the public, not only as minorities in some corner, and that the largest world religions and the smallest world religions peacefully live together and work together. That's the base for us sitting here and then to dialogue how we can assure the future of our planet. So dialogue with the UN, yes, but it starts out with a dialogue of the religions among each other. To be frank, obviously it is much easier for us to dialogue around a topic, to have a common thing to do. That obviously brings us together much more easily than to start on a theoretical level, compare our religious convictions and our theologies. And this is the case with the planet. Our world is a comprehensive world. Our life is comprehensive. So if we would discuss with each other whether our life is more political or is more about economy or is about private life and family, is it more about feeling, is it about more rational things? At the end of the day, we have to say it's all together. Yeah. And the more global our world becomes, the more difficult it becomes to change one aspect of this world and one aspect of the society alone without touching the rest. So you can't tell nowadays, I want to be involved in politics, but I want to keep out of economy. It's very hard to separate the two. There are good reasons to separate the two, but in reality, in our everyday life, and this is why if we go to one of the most important things we have to do in the moment, all related to the 17 sustainability goals, we have to see it's comprehensive. It is not about a national state, but it's also not about the United Nations as all the national states meeting together. If the two do not cooperate, if the UN has nice plans and the national states don't want to go for it, or the national states would have good ideas and the United Nations would be thinking about how to place new satellites somewhere in the world, I don't know, it would not work. It's politics and economy, it's politics and science, it's science and religions. You know that before COP26 we had this very informative, very stimulating dialogue between religious leaders and scientists that led up to a joint statement by in the Vatican by all major Christian leaders and many leaders from other larger and smaller religions to COP26. Yeah, that means our dialogue here has to include the smaller and the bigger religions and faiths in this world, and of course all those non-religious worldviews in the world too. Even so, we know that they are quite influential political, but are not the most important actors when it comes to sheer numbers. Yeah, it's no longer possible to leave the religions out, and I'm thankful to the United Nations that the last 20 years gradually They have reached out to religious community to involve them on all levels. Not in all levels, the progress has been as far as it has been done by UNEP, and with Faith for Earth, they have taken the lead, and there are other areas in the UN where I hope that something similar will come. But the comprehensive life, the everyday life, no longer can be changed bypassing the worldview and the religions of people. And of course, the worldviews and religions by people mainly are shaped by religious leaders. Religions have different opinions in how far their people have to obey or not to obey, but we agree the views of religions are made by leaders and taken in by their followers. And if we really want to go for the biggest project we had so far, even so it's a project that has been, human beings have been responsible all of history, but it's now very much aware to us that we have to save our planet, or like Pope Francis likes to say, our home, our house. Yeah, we have to see that what is in the mind of the people, and this is shaped by religions and by worldviews, cannot taken aside. We cannot go for some practical projects and say, do this, do this, do this. The more we intervene into the everyday life of everyone, the more we intervene into the everyday life of companies, yeah, the more we expect governments to change that might get into problems with their voters. They have to convince the voters of things where 20 years ago we would have said, the voters will vote against it anyway. They don't want those changes. They want to become richer. They don't want this and this. Yeah, the more important becomes that faith of all kinds becomes an integral part of all our dialogue. So it's a dialogue with the UN. It's a dialogue among each other, because as long as we fight each other, we cannot go for positive projects. Our minds are shaped by other questions, but it's also a dialogue between all areas of our societies and our worlds, in which we need both. We need bold religious leaders who step up and say, wait a minute, religion is not just a private something and you can bypass it. Only if we can convince our people that to save the earth is part of our worldview, of our religious identity, of our theology, we will make it. But at the same time, we have to step down a bit, because we all know that even where we have quite detailed ideas how this world came into being, what this world is for, where this world is going to, we all agree that when it comes to the technical details, what we need to do, we are not better off than the experts, than the scientists, than those people who can work on those topics full time, day and night, and can have discussions of thousands of people about one specific topic and how to solve it. So I think we need to be very bold in this dialogue and say, no, we are not just an ornament to the UNEP, 50 years of UNEP, yeah, and feel good that we can contribute. And at the same time, we have to be very humble, knowing we can contribute very general principles, but we rely on the expertise of experts. And we have learned all that the best experts not necessarily have our own faith, but they might have a totally different faith and nevertheless help us to live in a better home, a better future, the earth created by God for us not to be destroyed, but be a joyful place for us, for the animals, for the plants, for every living being. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Schermacher, and thank you for your inspirational wisdom and words, and thank you for your call for intra and interfaith dialogue. And also thanks for your centers, the Creation Care and the Sustainability Center, for being partners, genuine partners in our cause and moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to introduce now Professor Dr. Azza Karam, Secretary General of Religions for Peace. Professor Azza Karam also holds a professorship of religion and development at the Vrije University in Amsterdam. She served as a senior advisor on culture at the United Nations Population Fund and as coordinator or chair of the United Nations Interagency Task Force on Religion and Development. She was also the lead facilitator for the United Nations Strategic Learning Exchanges on Religion, Development and Diplomacy, building on a legacy of serving as a trainer, facilitator of intercultural leadership and management. Her PhD in 1996 focused on political Islam and authored her first book in Arabic and in English, and has since published widely. Professor Karam, we are delighted to have many of your board members with us today, and I'm delighted to give you the mic.
Thank you very much indeed, and assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. It's a great privilege and honor to be with you here today. It allowed me to wake up before dawn, which is not something that I would normally do on a public holiday, but for Dr. Iyad Abu Mughli, much is possible and not at all troublesome. I wish to bid all the distinguished religious leaders and partners in faith engagement a great deal of respect and the warmest of greetings. I mentioned Dr. Iyad Abu Mughli's work for a reason. I have been familiar with his work since my days in the UN, which he has kindly referenced. And one of the most striking things about his tireless efforts is how inclusive and committed he continues to be to serve in this cause, and how respectful of the religious impulse. One of the few people who joined the strategic learning exchanges I used to facilitate, who didn't need much convincing, and in fact was able to share from his own engagement and legacy of work so much of his belief in the primary roles that religions have and can contribute to our societies. So Dr. Iyad, it is absolutely a privilege for me to be able to congratulate you on this moment and the many apex moment that you have successfully managed to steer the UN Environment Program towards. The UN Environmental Program is actually the oldest United Nations entity to work with religious leaders and actors since the early 1970s. I was very grateful for the historical overview that was provided by one of our distinguished speakers here today, because history is legend, legend is reality, and our reality is what ultimately has to structure our futures. So important to know that Dr. Iyad walks in shoes that are extremely big and impactful, and walks proudly in these shoes. Also important to realize that these religious leaders who are gathered here today, who form the heart of the work of Religions for Peace, the United Nations of religious institutions and faith communities, which has been serving the space of multi-religious collaboration for over 52 years, that these religious leaders also came together in 2019, December, to agree on 6 strategic priorities for their multi-faith collaboration for the next 5 years, which are aligned strongly with the Sustainable Development Goals. And indeed, therein, nurturing a sustainable environment was one of those strategic priorities. I'm slightly concerned that we didn't hear about COVID, that we are living in the midst of, because the implications of it are deep and profound. And perhaps it is because we have yet to see what this impact will ultimately be on so many of us. But I do wish to point to something that I have learned from the distinguished leaders on this call, Professor Schirmacher, Rabbi Rosen, Cardinal Turkson, amongst others. And that is that quintessentially what religions are is the fundamental foundation, the legacy, the heritage, the consciousness of humanity. As such, one of the main strengths of any faith tradition is that longitudinal existence and perspective. If they are legacy, they are heritage. If they are heritage, they are reality. If they are reality, they are quintessential to our future. So, given this incredible ability to harvest a legacy, to serve, to be the foundations of our collective human consciousness, how is it possible that this ability of these different religious institutions and faith actors to come together remains an aspect of aspiration, remains something that, as Professor Schirmacher said, we all stand accountable for not yet having realized powerfully as it can be, as powerfully as it should be. Multi-religious collaboration, given the legacy and the heritage, is principally what we need to transform our consciousness such that instead of serving our own religious institutions, our own ideologies, our own institutional imprint, we are committed to that which is beyond, to that which came before, that is today, and will continue to exist after. Why is multi-religious collaboration such an add-on, such a, perhaps when we get there, kind of thinking? And perhaps, distinguished guests and speakers and faith communities, perhaps it is because we are still so very mired in our pre-COVID way of being, the pre-COVID way of being that has led us to COVID, and that has led us to a place where we're not sure when we're going to get out of COVID, precisely because we are so mired in our own spaces, our own territories, our own institutional modalities, our own faith or lack thereof. Multi-religious collaboration should be the consciousness of civil society and of that which we do. It should tell us whether we are doing right or wrong. And yet, ironically, what we're confronting today is a situation where even the most committed of faith communities, even the most committed of leaders, are still speaking to their own respective tradition. Hence, the need to doff my cap extremely deferentially to the religious leaders who form Religions for Peace's World Council, and some of whom are on this call today, because every single one of them spoke to the primacy of serving together, of serving for the other. And that is the critical turning point for us. That is the moral consciousness that our community needs. In that space where multi-religion becomes the consciousness that saves our world, not only ecologically, but it becomes the ecosystem, the multi-religious as the ecosystem of our human and planetary existence, it is in that space that we must strive. I have seen many new initiatives emerging over the last just 5 years, a plethora such that it is almost impossible to keep count of all of them. I doff my hat to each and every one of them, but I worry that very few of them look to work together, that each of them seems to be more interested in its own imprint, its own territorial impact. And I warn against this. I warn that the multi-religious should not be a space of competition, but a space of collaboration. I warn that the multi-religious impulse has to be fundamentally a civil society, global civil society, protective impulse. I would like us to note that religious institutions have many roles, but perhaps one of the most important is the responsibility to protect democracy and human rights. We will not protect our planet as authoritarian regimes. We will not protect our planet as authoritarian institutions. We will destroy it. We are destroying it. The multi-religious impulse and imperative is the imperative to save our planet first and foremost. How? Through the to moral, strategic, political, social, and financial commitment to uphold democracy and human rights. Not to give excuses for authoritarian regimes, not to use money to silence the criticisms against authoritarianism, but indeed to use and leverage the moral authority of every single faith tradition to ensure that it can uphold human rights and democracy, because there isn't going to be a planet without them that is worthy of our efforts. The ecosystem of our partnerships should be a key commitment from not only the United Nations, as Professor Schirmacher has noteworthy said, but from every single individual who is engaged in a space to save our lives and to save our planets. In the next iteration, Dr. Iyad, I hope to hear quite a bit from indigenous communities around the world who remain sorely absent in many of our conversations and multi-religious discussions. I would also love to hear UNEP's commitment not only to Faith for Earth, but to how Faith for Earth is strengthened and can be strengthened by other initiatives that UNEP has leveraged. And in that regard, I would like to thank the Norwegian government for its commitment to sustain not only Faith for Earth, but its predecessor, the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. We have heard about the importance of soil. Let me please take a moment to say that our planet has lungs. The lungs of our planet are the rainforests of this world. So for this Faith for Earth initiative to acknowledge what is quintessentially the religious legacy, the heritage, it would be helpful to know how Faith for Earth acknowledges the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, because it is one of its own. It is UNEP's own. And if one of our United Nations institutions can itself be doing several parallel things at the same time and not linking the dots, then there is no authority to hold religious institutions accountable for their own responsibility to link the dots, not only within their own adherents, but amongst all those who are believers of whatever faith tradition and none. So I'd like to make that call to ensure that multi-religious collaboration is not a space for competitiveness and competition where money ultimately determines what happens and the partnerships, where money drives the ecosystem of partnerships, but that presence in country, a legacy, the legacy of multi-religious collaboration of over many decades should be taken into account when considering how to ensure that Faith for Earth goes beyond advocacy and into actual work that can replicate success stories, such as the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which intentional on ensuring that it can protect rainforests, i.e. the lungs of our universe at a time when the lungs of human beings are suffering from COVID everywhere in the world. Intent on protecting the lungs of our universe, the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative has gone way beyond the conversations and the talking and into active legislation and changes. But it has done something else as well, which Cardinal Turkson referred to in passing, to try to heal, to effectively heal wounds between indigenous communities and certain churches. Wounds that go deep, that go very, very long in history. But in an attempt to ensure that we can save the lungs of the universe, we are in the process of healing wounds related to faith, institutions. That is ultimately what will determine the success of Faiths for Earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, my sister, my friend, Dr. Azakaram. You always not only inspire me, but also impressively introduces important points to consider. And I assure you that the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is part and parcel of the program. And this is exactly what we are doing, not only to protect the lungs of the earth, but all elements of this important body for us. So we are encouraging other initiatives to flourish from within UNEP and from outside. So thank you very much, and we are very pleased that you are at the helm of Religions for Peace, which is the UN of religions. So thank you for being with us today and for inspirational words. Now it's an honor to introduce Dr. Hosna Ahmed, Executive Director of Global One 2015, which is a faith-based international NGO focusing on women. Dr. Ahmed holds a PhD in International Environmental Law from London University and is an honorary fellow of the Edward Cadbury Center for the Public Understanding of Religion at Birmingham University. She is a member of the Multi-Faith Advisory Council to the UN Interagency Task Force on Religion and Development and is the coordinator for the Alliance of NGOs and CSOs for South-South cooperation. She also sits on the steering committee of the World Bank's Moral Imperative Initiative. And in 2010, Dr. Hosna Ahmed was appointed as an officer of the Order of the British Empire for work promoting social justice with disadvantaged communities. Dr. Hosna, the mic is yours.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Iyad, Excellencies, friends, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you. I'm truly honoured to be speaking to you today at the commencement of the 5th session of the UNEA 5.2 and the Faith for Earth dialogue sessions. As a British Bangladeshi woman of faith and colour, I am hopeful. I'm hopeful despite so much going wrong. COVID, COP26 Glasgow, George Floyd, hijab bans, the list just goes on and on. The pandemic has given us a chance to rethink all our assumptions and reimagine our world. With the climate crisis, we also need to think about the scope and scale of human migration due to climate change and how it will test the limits of national and global governance as well as international cooperation. We have a new generation of brave lions and tigers who have emerged from our apathy and lack of action on the climate crisis and social injustice. Muskan Khan of India and Greta Thunberg are refusing to take nonsense from anyone. They are my hope. Close to 90% of the youth live in developing countries, the global south, where they make up a large proportion of the population. With 1.8 billion, we have the largest generation of youth in history, and they're not going to let us fail them, inshallah. The program for UNEA 5.2 is also my hope. It's a very impressive program running over 2 weeks, particularly because it recognizes that we cannot live in silos and attempts to capture the intersectionality and diversity which has been missing in the past. Of course, we need the science and the political will, but without hearts and minds, without a strong moral compass, without addressing historical injustices and continuing inequity, we will not succeed. To cite Faith for the Climate, a British interfaith climate organisation, many of our faiths and belief systems are united by the Golden Rule. Treat others as you wish to be treated. In a globalised world, this does not apply only to our near neighbours. It calls us to take responsibility for the global impacts of our actions. We must begin to ask how wealthy societies can make reparation for the harm caused by centuries of imperialism, extraction and exploitation. Recognition of the role of faith communities and indigenous communities is only the beginning. It's taken decades, but I believe that we have come a long way from people like me being tick boxes and token figures. Through the visionary leadership of my mentors, Professor Azakaram and Martin Palmer, and of course, UNEP's very own visionary leader, Dr. Iyad Abu Mogli, these powerhouses have enabled today to happen. In 1986, with the Assisi Declarations, we had 5 faith statements on humanity and nature. Then in 2015, for the establishment of the Multi-Faith Advisory Council to the UN IATF on Faith and Development. And the same year, the World Bank's Moral Imperative was formed. The International Partnership on Religion and Sustainable Development, PARD, was established in 2016. So faith communities with their vast networks, adherents, educational structures and spiritual practices are valuable partners in the pursuit of sustainable development. This wonderful engagement between the UN, international institutions and faith communities has to be cemented. If we are truly to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, we need now to move to the next level. UNEP has 9 major stakeholder groups. We can promote a value-based development paradigm by first acknowledging the faith-based organizations as a major group rather than within the NGOs group, respecting our opinions and acting on it, putting finances behind us, supporting us through capacity building us, and recognizing the complexity of diversity within our groups, women and youth, not just looking to religious leaders, but to faith actors. For me, the key words are true collaboration, partnership, and capacity building. Faith-based organization can no longer be an add-on. Faith-based organizations such as my organization, Global One, make a unique and vital contribution to global efforts on environmental protection and ecosystem restoration and have a growing track record of multi-faith action in this area. The UN's SDGs are about upholding human rights and focusing on economic and social development and environmental protection. The necessity of protecting the planet is the theme behind the SDGs, but also a common theme in all religions to preserve our world. Therefore, cooperation to sustain our planet should be in the common interest, the common home, as we've heard earlier about the Pope's. As the SDGs are a universal call to action, it's important that all faiths work together to address the pressing concerns globally that impact on all human life. I believe that every single SDG is based on Islamic traditions and teachings. As a Muslim, I'm taught that humans are stewards of this planet. It's a trust given to us by Allah, and we have the responsibility of preserving the natural order on earth and maintaining its balance, and must strive to ensure the fair allocation of resources. Islam is eminently pragmatic, with a long tradition of legal reasoning that lends itself to codified environmental protection as well as metaphysical environmental consciousness. As early as the 13th century, the Muslim scholar Izzuddin ibn as-Salam created a bill of legal rights of animals and plants. In the same vein, today's Muslim leaders and institutions can take the lead in the current fight to save our planet and its precious ecosystems. I'd like to end by wishing you a successful UNEA 5.2 and reminding you all that our time on this planet is short, so we must make the best of it. And as our blessed Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, I am in this world like a rider who halts in the shade of a tree for a short time and after taking some rest resumes his journey, leaving the tree behind. Ahmed Tirmidhi. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Husna, for the wise words and for your call to better recognize the role of faith-based organizations within the UN system. Something that needs to be brought up to the ECOSOC and other international intergovernmental fora. And thank you for taking the lead and initiating the Ummah for Earth, which brings Muslim and Islamic scholars to and activists to contribute to our cause and environmental issues. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Reverend Stephen Avino, the Executive Director of the Parliament of World Religions, the world's premier interfaith convening organization. Reverend Avino has remained deeply committed to the success of the global interfaith movement, serving as a key organizer for the 2015 Parliament convening in Salt Lake City, the 2018 Parliament convening in Toronto, which I had the privilege and honor to attend, and the 2021 virtual Parliament convening, which I also participated as an online speaker. Reverend Avino earned a Master's in Arts and Religious Studies at the Chicago Theological Seminary in 2015 and became ordained through the Independent Catholic Movement in 2019. Reverend Avino advocates for the legacy of the Parliament and a more inclusive interreligious movement. Reverend Avino, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad, and thank you to all the distinguished speakers I'm privileged to follow today. Like Dr. Iyad said, my name is Stephen Avino, and I am the Executive Director of the Parliament of the World's Religions, the world's premier interfaith convening organization. Sustainability and concern for the environment, including climate change, have been integral to the mission of the Parliament of the World's Religions. The Centenary Parliament in Chicago in 1993 adopted the Declaration toward a Global Ethic, in which care for the earth and all life was a core theme. This principle has been developed and underscored by the 5th Directive on Sustainability and Care for the Earth, formally added to observe the Global Ethic's 25th anniversary in 2018. In October 2015, more than 10,000 members of the world's faith and spiritual communities at the Salt Lake City convening of the Parliament of the World's Religions affirmed this statement, embracing our common future and interfaith call to action on climate change, which was subsequently presented to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon at the Paris climate meeting by Parliament Climate Ambassador Corinna Gore, and became the founding document of the Parliament's Climate Action Task Force. Climate change was a central theme at the Toronto convening of the Parliament of the World's Religions in 2018, and also at the Parliament's virtual convening last fall, where we launched our statement on the turning point in this crisis. Looking ahead to 2023, the Parliament will once again convene in Chicago, where we will once again address climate change and care for the Earth. That being said, you might guess from this history that the Parliament was honored to release the book Faith for Earth, A Call to Action with the United Nations Environment Program. And you would be right. Today, they invited me to speak on the question, can religions come together unified in their call for a better future for humanity based on spiritual and moral responsibilities toward our only planet? I'm here today to say that not only can they, but it's imperative that they do so. In the original 1993 text of the Global Ethic, the aforementioned declaration that lays out the universal values and principles shared by the world's religious, spiritual, and cultural traditions, only 4 sentences in, 4 sentences from the top, it clearly states we condemn the abuses of Earth's ecosystems. In the Global Ethics 5th Directive, it reminds us that a central tenet of the world's religions is you shall not be greedy, and to remember the good of all. As greed is the driving force behind the destruction of the home where we all live, religions must stand up this time and call for those behind this greed to make changes and to remember the good of all. Not only the all that exists today, but the all that will exist. The future generations depend on us to make change now, not later, but now. The religions of the world must tell its adherents that simply saying, I will be dead, so I don't care what happens in the future, a statement I have personally heard many people say privately, is frankly selfish and the opposite of caring for the all. And when I say all, I mean not only the all that is human beings, but the creatures we share this planet with. All people of faith have a moral obligation to care for this planet. That is why it is so important that the religions of the world stand up during this crisis and call for change and take action. People of faith make up the vast majority of the global population. Many have said today over 80%. Therefore, they must be included in the call for a better future. People of faith must work together with the scientists and the politicians and even those who are not of faith to make changes now, real concrete changes. It will not be easy now that we have passed the turning point. There will be suffering, but we must do this for the love of our planet and fellow human beings and creatures. We must minimize this crisis as much as we can. The future of our planet need not be bleak. As people of faith, we can fix this world. I call upon the religions of the world to follow their own tenets and educate their adherents about the climate crisis so more and more people take action. And I call on the religious and spiritual traditions of the world to come together to work on solutions together, for we're all affected by this crisis. I would like to conclude with a prayer from the liturgy of my own personal religious tradition that is particularly appropriate for this occasion. Holy Archangel Raphael, we invoke thy aid. Ever-present Christ, pour down thy healing power upon our earth and enfold her in the light of thy love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Stephen, and thank you for being one of the distinguished partners that we have worked with over the past few years and the wonderful book that we have launched together and for taking the lead in bringing thousands when I was in Toronto together to discuss environment, development, poverty, and all the sustainable development goals and areas. So thank you very much. Distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, I am more than indebted to your words of wisdom and inspirations. You have addressed very relevant issues concerning the state of the environment and our moral and spiritual responsibility before our Creator and before the people we serve. So thank you for being with us today, and I hope that you will join us in the remaining 24 sessions of the dialogue, with the next one actually has just started this afternoon, and where we will be launching with our distinguished partners some online courses on religion and ecology. Thank you very much indeed. God bless you, and see you back shortly. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.